A question about the origin of the COVID-19 that has killed millions since it emerged in Wuhan, China in late 2019 is still a controversial topic until today. Did it spill from animals to humans in nature, on a farm, in a market, or did it leak from a lab like the Wuhan Institute of Virology, a leading center of coronavirus research in China? Drawing on comparative analysis of genomic data, the paper's authors of the proximal origin of SARS-CoV-2 wrote that, quote-unquote, our analysis clearly showed that SARS-CoV-2 is not a laboratory construct or a purposefully manipulated construct. Toward the end of the paper, they added, we do not believe that any type of laboratory-based scenario is plausible. In explaining the origin of the virus, instead, the scientists strongly favored a natural origin, arguing that the virus likely spilled from bats into humans, possibly by way of an intermediate animal host. Reported by Jimmy Tobias of The Intercept, the peer-reviewed paper proved to be hugely influential. Dr. Francis Collins, then the director of the National Institute of Health, or NIH, announced its findings in a post on the agency's website in late March 2020. On April 17 press briefing at the White House about concerns that SARS-CoV-2 had come out of a lab in China, Dr. Anthony Fauci, who recently stepped down as the head of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, referenced the paper, describing its conclusions and calling its authors a group of highly qualified evolutionary virologists. On March 27, 2022, ABC News ran an article titled, Sorry, Conspiracy Theories. Study concludes COVID-19 is not a laboratory construct. In that article, one of the paper's authors, Robert Gary, is quoted saying that there's a lot of speculation and conspiracy theories that went to a pretty high level. So we felt it was important to get a team together to examine evidence of this new coronavirus to determine what we could about the origin. What that quote didn't quite convey was that Gary and several of the paper's other co-authors were themselves initially suspicious that SARS-CoV-2 may have emerged from a laboratory. They communicated their suspicions to Fauci, Collins, and others in late January and early February 2020. And what ensued was a period of intense and confidential deliberation about the origin of the virus. The documents obtained by The Nation and The Intercept offer detailed insights into those confidential deliberations. It shows that Fauci and Collins took part in a series of email exchanges and telephone calls during the early days of the pandemic in which several leading virologists expressed concern that SARS-CoV-2 looked potentially engineered. Participants also pondered the possibility that laboratory activities could inadvertently lead to the creation and release of the virus. It creates an anxious sense of urgency and includes speculation about the specific types of laboratory techniques that might have caused the virus to emerge. After roughly a week of debate and data collection, one of the key figures involved in the deliberations characterized the focus of the group's work as follows, quote-unquote, to disprove any type of lab theory. Several of the scientists on the calls and emails then went on to write and publish Proximal Origin. It became one of the best-read papers in the history of science. In response to a Freedom of Information Act lawsuit filed by the reporter, the records presented were made public by the NIH. Their release in late November came as Fauci prepared to leave the agency after decades of service, and as Republicans in Congress, in anticipation of their imminent control of the House, geared up to launch oversight investigations into the origin of COVID-19. Many of the documents analyzed were first obtained in 2021 in heavily redacted form by journalist Jason Leopold. Some of them were later presented to Congress, where staffers were allowed to look at them and take notes but could not keep full copies. It was only after more than a year of litigation that the NIH released these documents without redactions. Lawrence Gostin, a professor of global health law of Georgetown University, who favors a natural origin explanation for SARS-CoV-2 but doesn't rule out the possibility of lab origin, said that, quote-unquote, these documents are important and they should have been available earlier. The public has a right to know. All the world has suffered from COVID-19 and we deserve to have all the information open and transparent with a rigorous evaluation of what the cause was. I am Lovely Montoya of Manila STV.